They called him the Broken Wolf. Liam O'Connor sat in a wheelchair at the edge of the ballroom, invisible to every stunning woman in the room. They were all there for his brother Brett, the future alpha, the athlete, the golden boy. Phoebe was just a 20-year-old omega with a bank account in the negatives and a rank so low she wasn't even supposed to make eye contact with the guests. But when the clock struck midnight and the lunar selection began, she didn't walk toward the golden boy, like everyone expected. She walked toward the man everyone said was worthless. She did the unthinkable. And what happened next didn't just shock the pack, it burned their entire hierarchy to the ground. This is the true story of how an outcast found her mate and how they survived the war that followed. Her name was Phoebe Smith. If you Google her now, you might see the paparazzi photos or the headlines about the O'Connor pack restructuring. But back in September 2022, she was nobody. Actually, she was less than nobody. She was an omega in the Black River pack, situated just outside of Seattle. In their world, being an omega wasn't just a rank. It was a life sentence of servitude. She worked in the pack house kitchens, scrubbing pots that were larger than she was listening to the high-ranking wolves gossip about their designer dresses and their trips to Paris. The biggest event of the decade was the Silver Moon Gala. It was effectively a bachelor-style casting call for the future alpha Brett O'Connor. Brett was 25, handsome in that typical arrogant way, blonde hair, a jawline that could cut glass, and an ego the size of the state of Washington. Every eligible she-wolf from the Pacific Northwest was invited. And because of an archaic law in their pack constitution, Section 4, Paragraph 2, every unmarried female between the ages of 18 and 25 had to attend. Even the help. Even Phoebe. She stood in front of the cracked mirror in her tiny dorm room that night. She didn't have a gown. She was wearing a charcoal grey bridesmaid dress she'd found at a Goodwill in Tacoma for $12. It was slightly too big in the bust and frayed at the hem, but it was clean. "You look fine, Phoebe," she whispered to herself, trying to tame her frizzy brown hair. "Just blend in with the curtains. Don't spill anything. Don't look at Brett." The gala was held in the main Alpha Estate Hall. It was suffocating. The air smelled of expensive perfume, roasting prime rib, and the overwhelming pheromones of 200 desperate werewolves trying to attract a mate. The hierarchy was on full display. In the center of the room stood Alpha Patrick O'Connor, a massive man who ruled with an iron fist. Beside him was Brett, holding court, surrounded by girls like Tiffany Roche, the beta's daughter, who was wearing a red silk dress that probably cost more than Phoebe's entire life's earnings. But Phoebe's eyes didn't linger on them. They drifted to the corner of the room near the emergency exit. Sitting there in a motorized wheelchair was Liam O'Connor. Liam was the Alpha's eldest son. By birthright, he should have been the heir. But 3 years ago, a rogue attack had left him paralyzed from the waist down. In the brutal world of werewolves, a leader who cannot run, cannot hunt, and cannot shift is considered useless. Alpha Patrick had stripped Liam of his title the day he came home from the hospital. Liam looked nothing like his brother. He had dark, messy hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him perfectly, yet he looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. He held a glass of whiskey, his knuckles white against the crystal. People walked by him like he was furniture. Actually, they treated the furniture with more respect. At least they didn't look at the chairs with open pity or disgust. Phoebe felt a strange pull in her chest. It wasn't the mate bond, that electric shock they are all taught to expect. It was simpler. It was recognition. He looked as lonely in his tuxedo as she felt in her goodwill dress. She grabbed a tray of champagne flutes, trying to make herself useful so the enforcers wouldn't kick her out, and started weaving through the crowd. She watched Tiffany Roche detach herself from Brett's arm and strut toward the bar. She passed Liam. Liam, trying to be polite, shifted his chair back to give her space. "Watch it cripple," Tiffany hissed. It was loud enough for half the room to hear. The music didn't stop, but the conversation nearby did. Liam flinched. He didn't say a word. He just lowered his gaze, staring into his whiskey. Tiffany laughed a sharp, cruel sound and looked back at her friends for approval. "What, he almost ran over my toes with that thing. He shouldn't even be here. It's a mating gala, not a hospital ward." That was the moment. That was the moment Phoebe's life changed. A smart Omega would have kept walking. A smart Omega would have known that Tiffany Roche could have her fired or worse, beaten with a snap of her fingers. But Phoebe wasn't feeling smart. She was feeling angry. She walked right up to them. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "He moved to let you pass," Phoebe said. Her voice was shaky but clear. Tiffany spun around, her eyes narrowing. "Excuse me. Did the help just speak?" "He was being polite," Phoebe said, gripping the champagne tray so hard her fingers ached. "Which is more than I can say for you." The silence that fell over that corner of the room was instant and terrifying. Tiffany's face turned a shade of red that matched her dress. She stepped into Phoebe's personal space. Phoebe could smell the expensive Chardonnay on her breath. "You're Phoebe, right? The kitchen rat," she sneered. "Do you have a death wish?" "Leave her alone, Tiffany," a deep voice rasped. It was Liam. He hadn't looked up, but his voice was low and rough like gravel grinding together. Tiffany scoffed. "Oh, look at that! The broken prince is defending his servant. How fitting!" She deliberately tilted her glass. Red wine poured down not onto Phoebe, but onto Liam's lap. It soaked into his tuxedo trousers, staining them dark. It looked like blood. "Oops," she deadpanned. "Clumsy me." Liam didn't move. He just closed his eyes. The humiliation radiating off him was so potent, Phoebe could practically taste it. "You witch," she breathed. Before she could stop herself, Phoebe tripped. Well, she said she tripped. She stumbled forward, and the entire tray of 6 full champagne flutes was launched out of her hands. They crashed directly onto Tiffany Roche. Sticky, bubbling champagne drenched her hair, her face, and that $3,000 red silk dress. The scream she let out shattered windows. "You little bitch!" she shrieked, wiping champagne out of her eyes. Security was on them in seconds. 2 massive enforcers grabbed Phoebe's arms, hauling her back. She expected to be dragged to the dungeons. "Enough!" The command boomed across the hall. Alpha Patrick O'Connor marched through the crowd, parting the sea of guests. He looked at Tiffany, dripping wet, and then at Phoebe, held by his guards. Finally, he looked at his disabled son, covered in wine. "What is the meaning of this?" Patrick demanded. "She attacked me," Tiffany wailed, pointing a shaking finger at Phoebe. "That Omega threw a tray at me because I accidentally spilled a drop of wine on Liam." Patrick looked at Phoebe with cold, dead eyes. "Is this true?" "She poured wine on him on purpose," Phoebe said, lifting her chin. "I slipped." Patrick looked at Liam. "Liam, did she slip?" For the first time, Liam looked up. His grey eyes locked onto Phoebe's. There was shock there, and something else. Gratitude. She slipped, father. Liam lied smoothly. "The floor is slick." Patrick grunted, clearly not caring enough to investigate. "Clean this mess up. Phoebe, get out of my sight. You're lucky I don't strip your rank entirely. Go to the back." The guards released her. Phoebe fell back, her knees shaking. She turned to flee to the kitchen, but a hand caught her wrist. It wasn't a guard. It was Liam. His hand was warm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Thank you," he whispered. A spark, literal electricity, shot up her arm, from where his skin touched hers. Phoebe gasped. He felt it too. His eyes went wide, his pupils dilating instantly. "Mate." Her wolf, usually dormant and quiet, howled in the back of her mind. "Mate. Mate. Mate." She yanked her hand back, terrified. This couldn't be happening. An Omega and the Alpha's son. Even a disabled one. It was social suicide. It was dangerous. I have to go," she stammered, and she ran. She ran all the way to the scullery and locked herself in the pantry, hyperventilating among the sacks of flour. She hid for an hour, but you can't hide from the lunar ceremony. At midnight, the great bell tolled. The head enforcer, a brute named Gareth, banged on the pantry door. "Get out here, Smith. Alpha's orders. All females on the floor. Now!" Phoebe was dragged back into the ballroom. The atmosphere had shifted. The lights were dimmed and a spotlight shone on the center of the room. Alpha Patrick stood on the dais. "Tonight," he announced, his voice amplified by a microphone, "my son Brett will choose his mate, and the candidates will present themselves." It was a ritual. The eligible high-ranking girls lined up. Tiffany had cleaned herself up, though her hair was still damp, and she stood at the front of the line, looking smug. One by one they approached Brett. They offered gifts, bowed and scented him. Brett looked bored, dismissing them with a nod or a shake of his head. He was enjoying the power. Liam was sitting in the shadows again, far away from the dais. He had a towel over his lap to hide the wine stain. He looked resigned to his fate of being the spectator at his brother's coronation. Then Alpha Patrick did something cruel. He wanted to make a point. "The law states all must present," Patrick said, his eyes scanning the back of the room where the servants stood. "Even the runts. Come forward." He pointed at the line of Omegas. They shuffled forward. The crowd snickered. It was a joke to them. What would the future Alpha want with a kitchen cleaner? When it was her turn, Phoebe stepped into the spotlight. She felt small, dirty. Her dress was grey, her hands red from scrubbing. Brett looked her up and down and laughed. "Phoebe Wright. The one who spills champagne. I think I'll pass, unless you want to come clean my room later." The crowd erupted in laughter. Tiffany cackled the loudest. Phoebe stood there burning with shame. She should have bowed and walked away. That's what she was supposed to do. But then she felt it again. That pull. That magnetic tether in her chest, tugging her to the right. Toward the shadows. She didn't bow to Brett. She turned her back on him. The laughter died down instantly. You do not turn your back on the Alpha heir. She walked past the dais. She walked past the Alpha. She walked past the stunned crowd. The only sound was the clicking of her cheap heels on the marble floor. She stopped in front of the wheelchair. Liam looked up, his face pale. "Phoebe, what are you doing?" he hissed. "They'll kill you." "I'm following the law," she said loud enough for the room to hear. "The law says I must present myself to a son of the Alpha. It didn't specify which one." She dropped to one knee, not in submission, but to be at eye level with him. She reached out and took his hand. That spark returned stronger this time, like a lightning strike. The air around them seemed to shimmer. "I choose you," she said clearly. "Phoebe, don't," Liam pleaded, his voice cracking. "I have nothing. I am nothing. I can't give you a life." "I don't want their life," she replied. "I want yours." "Reject him, Alpha." Patrick's roar shook the walls. He stormed down the stairs, his face purple with rage. "You insolent little rat! You dare mock this family! You reject the future Alpha for this!" He gestured to Liam like he was a bag of trash. "I didn't reject anyone," she said, standing up and placing herself between the Alpha and Liam. "I found my mate, and unless you want to violate the sacred laws of the Moon Goddess, you can't separate us." The room was deadly silent. To separate fated mates is a capital offense in werewolf culture, even for an Alpha. Patrick stared at her, his chest heaving. He looked at Brett, who looked furious that he had been upstaged by his disabled brother and a servant. "Fine," Patrick spat. A cruel smile twisted his lips. "You want him? You can have him. But if you choose him, you choose his exile." He pointed to the door. "Get out, both of you. You are banished from the pack house. You can live in the old trapper's cabin on the northern border. No money, no support, no pack protection. If you survive the winter, maybe I'll let you back in." The old trapper's cabin had been abandoned for 20 years. It was essentially a shack in the middle of wolf-infested woods. It was a death sentence. Liam gripped the wheels of his chair. "Father, please, punish me, but don't send her there. She won't survive." "She made her choice," Patrick said coldly. "Leave, now, before I let the enforcers hunt you for sport." Phoebe grabbed the handles of Liam's wheelchair. "We're leaving," she said to Liam. "We don't need them." She pushed him toward the door. As they passed Tiffany, the Beta's daughter whispered, "Have fun freezing to death, loser." Phoebe didn't look back. She pushed Liam out of the ballroom, down the ramp, and into the cold September night. They had no car, no coats, just a wheelchair and a connection that felt like it could burn the world down. "I'm so sorry," Liam said as they hit the gravel driveway, the cold wind biting through Phoebe's thin dress. "I've ruined your life." She stopped and walked around to face him. She cupped his face in her hands. "Liam, look at me. For the first time in my life, I chose what I wanted. I'm not sorry." But as they began the 5-mile trek up the mountain to the rotting cabin, she had to admit she was terrified. And she had no idea that the real danger wasn't the cold. The real danger was the secret Liam was hiding, the reason his legs didn't work. It wasn't an accident. Someone in that ballroom had crippled him, and now that they were alone in the woods, they were going to come back to finish the job. The walk to the old trapper's cabin shouldn't have been possible. It was 5 miles of uphill, unpaved logging roads that had turned into rivers of mud in the autumn rain. Phoebe's heels broke within the first mile. She kicked them off and walked barefoot. The gravel sliced her feet, but the adrenaline numbed the pain. Pushing a motorized wheelchair, which was dead weight because the battery had died halfway up, was like pushing a boulder. Liam tried to make her stop. "Leave me here, Phoebe," he kept saying, his voice ragged. "Go back. Beg for forgiveness. They'll take you back." "Shut up, Liam," she panted, digging her toes into the mud for leverage. "I'm not going back to scrub Tiffany's dishes." They reached the cabin at 3 a.m. It was worse than she imagined. The roof was sagging. The windows were boarded up with rotting plywood, and the front door was hanging off its hinges. It smelled of wet fur and decay. She managed to get Liam inside and onto a dusty, moth-eaten mattress in the corner. She found an old wood stove, and thank God for her Omega training, she managed to get a fire going with some dry kindling she found under the porch. As the fire crackled, casting long, dancing shadows against the log walls, the reality set in. They had no food, no water, no phones. Phoebe's had been confiscated by the guards. They were alone. She collapsed next to the fire, shivering uncontrollably. The adrenaline was fading, and the cold was setting in. "Come here," Liam said softly. She looked at him. He was lying on the mattress, shivering too. His tuxedo shirt was ruined, stained with wine and mud. "Body heat," he said, his cheeks flushing slightly. "It's the only way we don't get hypothermia." Phoebe crawled onto the mattress beside him. It was awkward at first. She was a servant. He was royalty fallen or not. But as she pressed her back against his chest, a warmth flooded through her that had nothing to do with the fire. It was the bond. It hummed between them, knitting their souls together. For a long time they just lay there, listening to the wind howl through the cracks in the walls. "Why?" Liam asked into the darkness. "Why did you do it?" "Phoebe, you don't even know me." "I know what it's like to be invisible," she whispered. "And I saw the way you looked at your brother. You weren't jealous of his power. You were scared of him." Liam went rigid against her. "Phoebe," he said, his voice dropping to a serious, almost dangerous tone. "You need to know the truth. You need to know why I'm in this chair." He sat up, wincing, and began to unbutton his shirt. "Turn around. Look at my back." She sat up and moved behind him. The firelight flickered over his pale skin. He had broad shoulders, muscles defined from years of relying on his arms. But when she looked at his lower spine, she gasped. There wasn't a bite mark. There wasn't a claw mark from a rogue wolf. There was a scar, a precise surgical scar, right over his lumbar vertebrae, and surrounding it were black, spiderweb-like veins pulsing faintly under the skin. "That's not a war wound," she said, horror creeping into her voice. "That looks like—" "Silver nitrate and concentrated wolfsbane," Liam finished. "Injectable poison." She covered her mouth. "But rogues don't use syringes." "No," Liam said, buttoning his shirt back up. "They don't." He turned to face her, his grey eyes burning with intensity. 3 years ago, I didn't get attacked by rogues. I came home early from university. I walked into my father's study to surprise him. I found my brother Brett and the pack doctor discussing a collection of herbs. They were planning to spike the Alpha's tonic to kill our father slowly, so Brett could take over sooner. Her jaw dropped. "Brett was trying to kill Alpha Patrick." "Yes, but they saw me. I tried to run to shift, but Brett, he's faster. They knocked me out. When I woke up, I was in the hospital and my legs were gone. The doctor told everyone a rogue had broken into the house and snapped my spine. But the truth is they injected a paralytic agent directly into my spinal column. It blocks the nerve signals. It blocks my wolf from healing me." "So, you're not paralyzed?" she asked, her heart pounding. "My legs are there. The nerves are there, but the poison is a constant block. If I could get the antidote, a mixture of moonflowers and activated charcoal, I could heal. My wolf is screaming to heal." "But Brett controls the supply chain. He controls the doctor." He reached out and took her hand. "Phoebe, they didn't exile us because we embarrassed them. Patrick might have done that out of pride. But Brett let us go because he thinks this winter will kill me, and the secret will die with me. He thinks I'm weak." She squeezed his hand, feeling a surge of rage that was hotter than the fire. They stole his life. They stole his legs. And now they wanted him to freeze to death. "He's wrong," she said, looking at the broken door. "We're not going to die, Liam. We're going to survive. And then we're going to take it all back." For the next 3 weeks, they didn't just survive. They adapted. It turns out being a useless Omega is excellent training for survival. Phoebe knew how to patch a roof with thorn and pine boughs. She knew which berries were safe to eat. She made snares out of the wiring from the broken lamps in the cabin. And Liam was brilliant. He couldn't walk, but his upper body strength was terrifying. He carved a bow out of ash wood and could hit a rabbit from 50 yards away while sitting in his chair on the porch. They fell into a rhythm, a domestic, desperate, beautiful rhythm. They bathed in the creek ice-cold water that made them scream and laugh. They slept huddled together on the mattress. The bond deepened. She wasn't just his nurse or his servant. She was his partner, and he was hers. But happiness in a horror story is usually just the calm before the storm. It was a Tuesday night in late October. The air was crisp, signaling snow was coming soon. They had just finished a stew made of rabbit and wild onions. Liam suddenly went still. He dropped his spoon. "What is it?" she asked. "Shh," he hissed. He closed his eyes, tilting his head. "Movement. 3. No, 4 of them. Approaching from the south ridge." "Enforcers," she whispered, grabbing the fire poker, a heavy iron rod with a sharp hook on the end. "They're moving too quietly for enforcers," Liam said. "Enforcers want to be seen. These are assassins." He wheeled himself backward away from the firelight into the shadows of the kitchen area. "Phoebe, get down. Get behind the stove." "I'm not hiding," she said, her hands shaking, but her grip firm on the iron poker. "Phoebe, please. Crash." The window shattered. A Molotov cocktail, a beer bottle stuffed with a burning rag, sailed into the room. It smashed against the far wall and flames erupted, licking up the dry logs. "Get them out!" a voice screamed from outside. It wasn't Gareth, the head enforcer. It was a hired voice, rough, unfamiliar. The front door was kicked in. 2 men burst in. They were wearing ski masks and tactical gear, holding serrated hunting knives. Not official pack weapons. These were murder weapons. "There's the cripple," one shouted, lunging toward Liam's empty wheelchair by the fire. But Liam wasn't in it. From the shadows of the kitchen, an arrow flew with a deadly thwip. It struck the first attacker in the thigh. He howled and went down. "Phoebe, run!" Liam roared. The second attacker turned toward Liam's voice, raising a heavy baton. He charged into the dark kitchen. Phoebe didn't run. She screamed a primal Omega scream and swung the fire poker with everything she had. The heavy iron hook caught the second attacker in the ribs. She heard a sickening crack. He grunted and backhanded her. The force sent her flying across the room. She hit the wall hard, her vision going white. "Don't you touch her." She looked up, dazed, to see something impossible. The attacker was standing over her, raising his knife. But then a blur of motion launched from the floor. It was Liam. He had dragged himself across the floorboards with terrifying speed. He grabbed the attacker's ankle and yanked. The man fell backward, hitting his head on the stone hearth. Liam was on top of him instantly. He didn't have the leverage of his legs, but he had the rage of an alpha protecting his mate. He punched the man once, twice, 3 times, until the attacker stopped moving. The cabin was filling with smoke. The fire was spreading. "We have to go," Liam coughed, crawling back toward her. "There were 4. She gasped, wiping blood from her lip. "Liam, you said 4. Where are the other 2? As if on cue, a silhouette appeared in the burning doorway. It was Tiffany Roach. She wasn't wearing a mask. She was wearing a designer trench coat and holding a silver pistol. Beside her stood another masked thug. "Well, well," Tiffany smirked, looking at the chaos. "Harder to kill than cockroaches, aren't you?" "Tiffany," Liam rasped, pulling himself up to sit against the wall, shielding Phoebe with his body. "Why?" "Brett promised me Luna," she said, casually, leveling the gun at Liam's chest. "But he's paranoid. He can't sleep while you're still breathing. So I offered to handle it. Consider it my wedding gift to him." She clicked the safety off. "Any last words, broken wolf?" Phoebe looked at Liam. He wasn't looking at the gun. He was looking at the flames climbing the wall behind Tiffany. He looked at Phoebe, and his eyes flashed not human grey, but a glowing, luminous gold, the colour of an alpha. "Yeah," Liam growled, his voice vibrating with power that shook the floorboards. "Duck!" Phoebe didn't question him. She threw herself flat on the floor. Liam didn't shift, he couldn't fully, but he let out a roar. It wasn't a scream. It was an alpha command, magnified by the life-or-death adrenaline. "Drop it!" The command hit Tiffany like a physical blow. Her wolf instinct forced her hand open. The gun clattered to the floor. She looked down, shocked her human mind, fighting her wolf instinct. That split second was all they needed. The roof beam above the door, weakened by the fire, gave way with a groan. Tiffany looked up just as a massive burning log crashed down between them and the intruders blocking the doorway in a shower of sparks and debris. "Back door!" Liam yelled. Phoebe scrambled up, grabbed Liam under his arms and dragged him toward the back exit. They tumbled out into the cold night air and rolled down the embankment into the wet grass just as the cabin's windows blew out. They lay there gasping for air, watching their home burn. "You used the voice," she whispered, staring at him. "You used the alpha voice. You overpowered her." Liam was pale sweat dripping down his face, exhausted from the effort. "The poison. The adrenaline pushed through it for a second. But it's gone. Now." "It's enough," she said, checking his pulse. She looked back at the burning cabin. Tiffany and her thug had retreated. Phoebe could hear their SUV peeling away down the logging road, probably assuming they had burned inside. "They think we're dead," she said, a cold realization washing over her. "This is our chance." She looked at Liam. "We need that antidote. We need to go to the city. We need to find the ingredients." Liam nodded, his jaw set. "And then we come back, not to hide, to hunt." She helped him sit up, the firelight reflected in his eyes. "Where do we go?" she asked. "I have an old contact," Liam said. "Someone my father exiled years ago for practicing forbidden medicine. If anyone can brew the antidote, it's him. He lives in the underground, the human sector of Seattle, where wolves don't go." "Then we go to Seattle," she said. She looked at the wheelchair. It was inside the burning cabin. "I can't walk, Phoebe," Liam said quietly. "Then I'll carry you," she said, "or we'll steal a car. But we are not dying here." She stood up, and she saw something glinting in the grass where the first attacker had fallen before dragging himself away. It was a phone. She picked it up. The screen was cracked, but it was unlocked. Open on the screen was a text chain. Contact Golden Boy. Brett text. Make it look like an accident. Burn the place. I want them ash before the wedding on Saturday. Saturday, she read aloud. Brett's coronation and wedding are on Saturday. That was 4 days away. We have 4 days, Liam said, his voice hardening. 4 days to heal me. 4 days to get back. 4 days to stop the wedding. He looked up at her. Let's get to work. They hitchhiked to Seattle in the back of a poultry truck. It was humiliating, freezing, and smelled of raw chicken, but they didn't have a choice. Phoebe sat on a crate, holding Liam's head in her lap, as he drifted in and out of consciousness. The exertion of the alpha voice at the cabin had drained him. His skin was grey, clammy. The poison was fighting back. Stay with me, she whispered, brushing damp hair off his forehead. We're almost there. Dr. Arthur Sylvan. Liam mumbled, his teeth chattering. Pioneer Square, beneath the antique shop. They arrived in the city at 4 a.m. on Wednesday. Seattle's underground isn't just a tourist trap. In their world, it's a sanctuary for the exiled. Wolves who refuse to bow to corrupt Alpha's healers who asked too many questions. They all ended up here. Phoebe found the antique shop. The door was locked, but she saw a symbol etched into the brickwork, a wolf with a serpent's tail, the mark of a healer. She pounded on the door. Help! We need Dr. Sylvan. A slat slid open. A pair of suspicious, bespectacled eyes peered out. We're closed. Go away. I have Liam O'Connor, she said, her voice breaking. He's dying. The door flew open. An elderly man with wild white hair and a stained apron stared at them. He looked at Liam slumped in the makeshift wheelchair Phoebe had stolen from a hospital lobby 3 blocks back. My God, Sylvan breathed. The lost prince. I thought the rumors were true. I thought you were dead. He ushered them inside, down a hidden staircase that smelled of dried sage and rubbing alcohol. His clinic was a converted basement filled with jars of strange liquids and humming machinery. They lifted Liam onto a metal table. Sylvan cut away Liam's shirt, revealing the black spider-webbed veins on his back. They had spread. They were reaching his neck. Wolfsbane concentrate, Sylvan muttered, running a scanner over Liam's spine. Mixed with a synthetic neurotoxin. This is military grade. Who did this? His brother, Phoebe, said, her fists clenching. Can you fix him? Sylvan looked at her, his expression grave. I can extract the toxin, but the nerves have been dormant for 3 years. Waking them up, it will be like being set on fire from the inside out. Most wolves would die from the shock. Liam grabbed Sylvan's wrist. His grip was weak, but his eyes were fierce. Do it! Liam, you might not survive the procedure, Sylvan warned. I'm already dead if I don't, Liam rasped. Do it. Tonight. What followed was the longest night of Phoebe's life. Sylvan didn't have anesthesia that worked on wolves. Their metabolism burns through it too fast. So Liam had to be awake. Phoebe stood by his head, holding his hands, while Sylvan inserted long silver needles into Liam's spine to draw out the black fluid. Liam screamed. It wasn't a human scream. It was the sound of a wolf being torn apart. His back arched off the table, his muscles spasming so violently the metal restraints rattled. Tears streamed down Phoebe's face as she kissed his forehead, his cheeks whispering over and over, I'm here, look at me, kill me, he begged at one point, his eyes rolling back. "Phoebe, please, just make it stop." "No," she sobbed, gripping his face. "You promised me. You promised we'd hunt. You don't get to quit now." For 6 hours he writhed in agony. The jar next to the table slowly filled with a thick tar-like substance, the poison that had stolen his life. As the sun rose on Thursday, the last drop was extracted. Sylvan applied a poultice of glowing blue moss moon orchid to the wounds. "It is done," Sylvan said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Now we wait. If he wakes up, he heals. If he doesn't," he didn't finish the sentence. Thursday passed, then Friday. Liam lay in a coma, feverish and thrashing. Phoebe didn't sleep. She didn't eat. She just sat by him, feeding him water through a straw, humming the songs her mother used to sing. By Friday night, she was losing hope. The wedding was in 12 hours. "He's not waking up," she whispered to Sylvan. "His wolf is fighting a war," Sylvan said gently. "He needs a reason to come back." She leaned down to Liam's ear. She placed her hand over his heart. She could feel the mate bond. It was faint, a flickering candle in a hurricane. "Liam," she whispered, "they're winning. Brett is going to be Alpha tomorrow. Tiffany is going to be Luna. They're going to erase you. They're going to erase us." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. She didn't know if it was true yet, but instinct told her it might be. "Come back to me," she pleaded. "Come back for your pack." Suddenly his finger twitched. Then his hand squeezed hers. His eyes snapped open. The grey was gone. His irises were a brilliant, swirling gold. He took a deep, ragged breath, like a drowning man breaking the surface. "Phoebe," he croaked. "I'm here," she cried, laughing through her tears. He sat up. He winced, rolling his shoulders. Then slowly he swung his legs over the side of the table. He looked at his feet. He wiggled his toes. "Stand," Sylvan commanded softly. Liam gripped the edge of the table. His knuckles turned white. He pushed. His arms shook, his back muscles rippled, and he stood. He was taller than Phoebe remembered. Without the chair, he towered over her. He stumbled, weak from atrophy, and she caught him. "I've got you," she said. "No." Liam said, a dark smile spreading across his face. He looked at his reflection in the metal cabinet. He looked dangerous. He looked like a king. "We have a wedding to crash." Saturday arrived under the cover of a blood moon. In werewolf lore, a blood moon is an omen. It signifies the end of an era and the violent birth of a new one. They stood at the edge of the forest, looking up at the O'Connor estate. It was glowing. Every window was lit, and the sprawling lawns were covered in white tents and fairy lights. Expensive cars, Bentleys, Mercedes Range Rovers lined the long, winding driveway. It looked like a fairy tale. But Phoebe knew it was a funeral pyre waiting to be lit. She adjusted the collar of her dress. She wasn't wearing rags anymore. Dr. Sylvan had given her something from his late wife's closet, a simple floor-length black gown. It was severe, elegant, and looked like mourning clothes. Beside her, Liam looked like a god of vengeance. He wore a black suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, but his face was pale, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. Standing was still agony for him. The nerves in his legs were firing, but they were raw. Every step was a battle. "Are you ready?" she whispered, reaching for his hand. He gripped her fingers tight. "I've been ready since the day they broke me." They didn't take the front door. They knew the security protocols better than anyone. While the guests were being ushered into the grand ballroom for the ceremony, they slipped through the servants' entrance in the kitchens. The staff was in a frenzy plating lobster and truffle risotto. They didn't notice two shadows slipping past the pantries and up the back stairwell. "Go," Liam said when they reached the second-floor landing. "Get to the AV booth. Don't miss." "I won't," she promised. She kissed his cheek. His skin was burning up, and ran towards the balcony that overlooked the ballroom. She crouched in the shadows of the organ loft, peering through the balustrade. The sight below made her stomach turn. The ballroom was transformed into a cathedral of white roses. Hundreds of guests sat in gilded chairs. The elite of the werewolf world were there. Alphas from neighboring territories. Wealthy business tycoons. The council members. At the altar stood Brett. He looked every inch the golden boy, blonde hair, perfectly coiffed, a white tuxedo that probably cost more than Phoebe's entire life's earnings. He was smiling, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was a victory lap. Next to him stood Alpha Patrick, looking proud but tired, and walking down the aisle to the swelling sound of a string quartet was Tiffany Roach. She was breathtaking, Phoebe had to admit. Her dress was a cloud of silk and lace, encrusted with crystals. She looked like a princess. But Phoebe knew the monster underneath the silk. She had seen her hold a gun to a disabled man's chest. She reached the altar. The music faded. The room held its breath. The elder, a white-haired wolf named Cornelius, raised his hands. "We gather tonight to witness the union of Brett O'Connor and Tiffany Roach and the ascension of the new alpha of the Black River Pack." Phoebe looked down at the mixing board in front of her. Her hands were shaking. She plugged in the phone, the cracked smartphone they had taken from the assassin in the woods. "Do you, Brett, take this woman to be your Luna?" Cornelius intoned. "I do," Brett said, his voice smooth and arrogant. "And do you, Tiffany, take this man to be your alpha?" "I do." Tiffany simpered, batting her eyelashes. Cornelius smiled. "Then by the power vested in me, by the council and the moon goddess, does anyone here object? To this union, speak now or forever hold your peace." It was a formality. No one objects to an alpha. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the rustle of expensive fabric. Cornelius opened his mouth to pronounce them mates. Boom! The heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom didn't just open. They exploded inward. Splinters of wood and twisted iron rained down on the back row of guests. Screams erupted. The string quartet stopped playing with a screech of discordant notes. Through the dust and debris, a silhouette appeared. For a moment, nobody moved. They were expecting a terrorist or a rogue attack. But as the dust settled, a collective gut swept through the room. It was Liam. He wasn't in a wheelchair. He was standing. He walked into the room. His gait was slow, deliberate, and predatory. Every step was a thunderclap in the silent hall. He wasn't using a cane. He wasn't leaning on a wall. He was walking under his own power, fueled by 3 years of rage. "I object." The voice that tore from his throat wasn't human. It was the alpha voice, but amplified to a level no one had ever heard before. It vibrated in the chest of every wolf in the room. Some of the weaker wolves actually fell out of their chairs, instinctively submitting to the power rolling off him. Brett turned around, his face draining of all color. "Liam," he choked out, "you look surprised, brother." Liam said, his voice low and dangerous, as he stalked down the center aisle. "Did you think the fire would finish what the poison couldn't? Security!" Brett screamed, his voice cracking. "Get him out!" "He's an exile. He's a cripple." 4 enforcers rushed toward Liam. Liam didn't even break stride. He backhanded the first enforcer with such speed and force that the man flew 10 feet into a table of champagne glasses. The second enforcer lunged, and Liam caught him by the throat, lifting him off the ground with one hand before tossing him aside like a rag doll. "Stay down," Liam growled at them. "This is family business." He reached the base of the dais. The wedding guests were on their feet now, whispering frantically. "He's walking. The broken wolf is walking." Alpha Patrick stepped forward, his eyes wide with shock. "Liam, how Dr. Sylvan said you would never, Doctor." "Sylvan lied to protect me from him," Liam pointed a shaking finger at Brett. "And from you, Father, you who let your heir rot in a chair, because you were too ashamed to look at him. You have no right to be here," Brett snarled, stepping in front of Tiffany, though he looked terrified. "I am the Alpha Designate. This is my wedding." "There will be no wedding," Liam said. "And there is no Alpha here, only a usurper." "I challenge you," Brett yelled, trying to regain control of the narrative. "I accept your challenge. I'll kill you right here." "No," Liam said calmly. "You won't." He looked up at the balcony. He looked right at Phoebe. "Phoebe," he commanded. "Play it." She hit the button. Suddenly, Tiffany's voice boomed through the massive speakers of the ballroom, drowning out the murmurs of the crowd. "Brett promised me Luna, but he's paranoid. He can't sleep while you're still breathing, so I offered to handle it. Consider it my wedding gift." Tiffany froze. Her hands flew to her mouth. Then the projector screen behind the altar, which had been displaying a slideshow of the happy couple, flickered and changed. It displayed the text message chain from the assassin's phone. "Contact Golden Boy." Brett message. "Make it look like an accident. Burn the place. I want them ash before the wedding." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Alpha Patrick turned slowly to look at his favorite son. "You," he whispered, "you tried to burn your brother alive. He's lying!" Brett screamed, his eyes wild. "It's fake. That Omega made it up. She's a witch." "It's not fake," a voice called out from the side entrance. Dr. Arthur Sylvan walked in, holding a jar filled with black tar-like fluid. "This is the neurotoxin I extracted from Liam's spine 3 nights ago. A toxin made from wolfsbane and synthetic paralytics. Only one person in this pack has access to the pharmacy logs to order these ingredients." He pointed at Brett. "The logs are signed by you, Brett." The crowd erupted. The betrayal was too deep, too dark. In werewolf culture, killing your kin for power is the ultimate sin. Brett realized he had lost the room. He realized his life was over. With a roar of pure, desperate rage, Brett's body contorted. Bones cracked, fur sprouted, and in seconds a massive russet wolf stood on the dais. He didn't care about the laws anymore. He lunged straight for Liam's throat. "Liam, look out!" Phoebe screamed from the balcony. Liam didn't shift. He didn't have time. As the massive wolf flew through the air, jaws snapping, Liam dropped to one knee, not in submission but to brace himself. He caught the wolf in mid-air, grabbing Brett's fur with both hands. The impact slid Liam back 3 feet, his boots screeching against the marble floor. But he held on. "I am done running from you," Liam roared. With a surge of strength that seemed impossible for a human form, Liam twisted his hips and slammed the massive wolf onto the marble steps of the altar. Crack! The sound of stone breaking echoed through the hall. Brett yelped, scrabbling to get up, snapping his jaws at Liam's face. Liam took a claw swipe to the chest, blood sprayed across his white shirt. But he didn't flinch. He punched the wolf, right on the snout. A blow so heavy it stunned Brett. Liam climbed on top of the wolf, pinning him down. He wrapped his hands around the wolf's throat and squeezed. "Yield," Liam commanded. His eyes were glowing a blinding gold. Brett struggled, thrashing his claws, tearing at Liam's suit. "I said, yield!" The alpha command slammed into the room like a physical shockwave. The stained glass windows shattered inward. The chandelier swayed dangerously. Brett whined, his tail tucked between his legs. He went limp. He yielded. Liam didn't let it go immediately. He leaned down, his face inches from the wolf's muzzle. "If you ever come near me or my mate again, I will rip your throat out. Do you understand?" The wolf whimpered. Liam stood up. He was bleeding, his suit was tattered, and he was gasping for air. But he stood tall. He turned to the crowd. He looked at the council members. He looked at his father, who was staring at him with a mixture of horror and awe. "Brett is unfit," Liam announced, his voice raspy but steady. "He is a kinslayer, a liar, and a coward." He looked at Tiffany. She was trying to sneak away toward the side exit. "And you," Liam said, "you will not run." Gareth, the head enforcer, stepped in front of Tiffany, blocking her path. He looked at her with pure disgust, then looked at Liam. Slowly, deliberately, Gareth dropped to one knee. He bowed his head, exposing his neck in submission. "Alpha Liam," Gareth said. It started a ripple effect. The enforcers knelt, then the elders, then the guests. Row by row, the elite of the werewolf world bowed before the man they had called a cripple. Alpha Patrick was the last to move. He looked at Brett, who had shifted back to human form and was curling into a ball of shame on the floor. Then he looked at Liam. Patrick bowed his head. "Alpha Liam," he whispered. "Forgive me." Liam didn't answer him. He turned his back on the power, on the glory, on the adoring crowd. He scanned the room until his eyes found the balcony. "Phoebe," he bellowed, "get down here!" She ran. She flew down the stairs, tripping over her gown, pushing past the kneeling guests. She ran straight onto the dais. Liam caught her in his arms. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling her scent, grounding himself. She could feel his heart hammering against her chest like a trapped bird. "We did it," he whispered into her hair. "We survived." He pulled back and looked at her. Then he turned her to face the crowd. He kept his arm wrapped possessively around her waist. "Listen to me," Liam addressed the kneeling pack. "This is Phoebe. She is the Omega who saved your Alpha. She walked through fire for me when you all turned your backs." He paused, his golden eyes sweeping the room. "She is your Luna. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. And I think you all know what happens when you disrespect me." He looked at Brett, broken on the floor. "Hail Alpha Liam! Hail Luna Phoebe!" Gareth shouted. "Hail!" The room roared back. Phoebe looked at Liam. He was smiling. It wasn't the polite, sad smile of the boy in the wheelchair. It was the fierce, triumphant smile of a king who had won his war. He kissed her then, a kiss that tasted of blood and victory. And as the crowd cheered, she knew one thing for certain. The story of the broken wolf and the invisible girl was over. The reign of the Golden Alpha had begun. Wow, I still get chills telling that story. It's crazy to think how close they came to losing everything. Right? It really makes you wonder how many people are underestimated just because they don't fit the perfect image society expects. If you enjoyed Liam and Phoebe's story, please do me a huge favor. Hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories about underdogs taking back their power, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. What did you think of Tiffany's punishment? Did she deserve worse? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.